everybody, welcome to WTF Hammer Underworlds. So today's video is just a response, I guess, a reaction video to the new updated competitive information released by Games Workshop about Warhammer Underworlds, June 2021. It's been long in the making. An entire season got released since the last FAR list, since the last errata list. So it's something nice to have this thing out. And a lot of people on Facebook are talking about it, on Discord are talking about it. I figured I'd talk about it too. This is just a bit of a breakdown as to the new information that we got from Games Workshop. As I mentioned, the new errata, the clarification of championships rules, and the update to restricted play. The new errata really affecting Molog and Ravagers. Championship rules really, as I mentioned, just providing clarity, and the restricted play giving us an update on the FAR list. So I'm going to be going through all those cards, all this information. I just want to give my thoughts as to how this affects the meta and the game in general. We'll just start with poor Molog. So the reason I say poor Molog is that in the errata, his fighter card has been slightly modified, but has created a severe impact on the way that this fighter gets played, on his effectiveness, really just nerfing him. Basically the way it goes is as this. So Molog's mob on his fighter card on the inspired side, his special ability gets changed to read as follows. This fighter can make a move or charge action even if it has one move token, which hasn't changed. In addition, when this fighter has one charge token, it can still be activated, but cannot make super actions. Whereas before it said something like, if this fighter has one charge token, they can still be activated normally. And this changes things, because now if Molog has a charge token, he cannot be activated normally. He cannot make super actions, which means he can't charge a second time. So you can't have Molog charge, get a charge token, and then charge again. That's off the table. That was a big move with Inspired Molog. Because a common strategy would be to, charge in maybe when he's uninspired, and if he happens to take a few hits, he gets inspired, then he could charge again. So it became a big deterrent for enemies not to want to attack Molog and give him the 3 wounds to cause him to get inspired, because it meant that he would become effectively a functional unit able to attack them a second time. And obviously he'd still move and then make an attack, his normal range 2 attack or scything attack. And I think that's okay. I think that, is a valid debuff, because Molog can really put out some hard damage when inspired, and with the whole primacy token out, it just gives him a large advantage over a lot of other warbands, most other warbands really, with the possible exception of Morgox. But the issue is that by getting inspired now, Molog is actually somewhat nerfed. And I'll explain what I mean. So if I'm not mistaken, in terms of the order of activations, the way it goes is that if you make a move, you put a move counter on the fighter. If you make a charge, after the move action portion of the charge, you put the charge token on the fighter, and then they can make an attack action. And for me, this is where the issue lies. So once Molog's inspired, even if he has no charge tokens, he can no longer charge into a scything attack. Because the moment you declare a charge action and he moves, he gets a charge token. Then by having a charge token, he can no longer take a super action, which means he cannot take a scything attack action ever after a charge action when inspired. Whereas when he's uninspired, he can charge and make a scything attack, no problem. So there is a bit of a nerf that happens there. For me, this wording is a little bit unnecessarily harsh. I think it would have been better if Games Workshop just worded it so that when this fighter has a charge token, they cannot make charge actions. So that wouldn't nerf the whole scything attack, but it does. So big hit on Molog. When he's inspired, he cannot charge into a scything action. He can't charge twice. Definitely big impact on how Molog plays, his mobility, his killing capacity. So poor Molog, his effectiveness has diminished substantially. Next is the Ravagers buff. Beta rules. So I'm not exactly sure what these beta rules mean. It just kind of seems that if the person organizing the tournament decides to allow them, then they work. If they decide not to allow them, then they don't work. I certainly wouldn't leave it up to the players to decide, because if one player has Ravagers, it's pretty unlikely that the other player also has Ravagers. I mean, they're not the most popular warband. So it becomes very easy for the opposing player just to not allow these beta rules. So the whole beta thing is a little bit odd to me. I would have just, if I were Games Workshop, I would have just made it official errata and then changed them down the line if they weren't working. But anyway, these are basically the new rules. Kagha's Ravagers, all the fighters change their Inspire condition to read after an activation. There are 2 or more Desecration tokens on the battlefield, as opposed to 3 Desecration tokens. So obviously nice. Getting 3 Desecration tokens on the battlefield is very difficult, especially considering how easy it is to remove Desecration tokens, or rather for the opponent to remove Desecration tokens. It makes it really hard for these guys to inspire normally. So nice way to remediate some of the crappiness that existed with the whole desecration mechanic for these guys. So definitely nice. I had actually proposed a better alternative. So for those of you who are subscribed with my channel, you would have noticed that I've made an alternative rule set for play out of the box to make the game more balanced across all warbands. And my suggestion for the desecration token was actually just to modify the way that the desecration token worked in the first place as follows. This is the Photoshop card I made. It's obviously not the best quality, but main difference is that normally desecration token can be removed after a power step if an enemy fighter is in the same hex as an objective token as a desecration token. In my alternative rules, I had changed the reading of this card to be at the end of your power step. Specifically has to be the player playing Kagras Ravagers who has put a desecration token on an objective token. It's only after their turn, if an enemy fighter is holding that objective token, that the token gets removed, because it gives them time to respond. It makes the mechanic more effective, makes the objective cards that these guys have more reliable to score. Only issue I have with the whole 2 objectives desecrated instead of 3 objective desecrated errata that got introduced is that it does nothing to help these guys score their desecration token related objective cards, which are hard to score. So of course these guys will inspire more easily, but those objective cards will still be left unplayed because the desecration mechanic itself is a very flawed mechanic. So I really wish they would have modified the way the mechanic works, maybe even use the exact mechanic that I used in my alternative rules, but just changing the 3 objectives to a 2 objectives inspire condition really is just a band-aid to a larger problem that has not yet been fixed. So I do like that these errata were introduced to help Kagras Ravagers, but I just don't think that is a perfect solution to the problem. So anyway, that basically does it for the errata. Next, there's just the championship rules. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. All these really do is provide clarity. I mean, we all pretty much knew what was deemed as championship format rules, what content is playable in championship play, which is basically all the Direchasm stuff, the Beastgrave stuff, and the Essentials card pack. All the boards from Beastgrave, from Direchasm, and the starter set. Pretty sure that the Essentials card pack and starter set will always be relevant in all rules sets. Would be cool also if the Arena Mortis stuff continued to be released, just because it gives a new gameplay style and also comes with a board. So that board could remain in circulation also. I don't think that they will. They'll probably rotate it out with Beastgrave because it is part of Beastgrave. But anyway, I'll say that they just clarified things. Nothing really new to mention here. No surprise. Happy it's out there though, so there's not going to be any debates about it. And finally, and possibly most interestingly, are the new Forsaken and Restricted cards. We've been waiting for these for a long time. An entire season's worth of content released in a 6-month period. Many broken decks. It's nice to have this thing finally out. And I just want to give a look at these cards that have been banned, these cards that have been restricted, give my thoughts as to whether or not I think it was necessary and how necessary it is. Starting with the Forbidden card, Ferocious Resistance, which reads as follows. Choose 1 friendly fighter, roll 1 magic dice for each of the chosen fighter's wound counters, and 1 additional magic dice if that fighter has 1 or more hunger counters for each roll of channel heal 1 to this fighter. So this card was really broken, especially for Morgox, especially for Mologs. These guys can get 4 wounds, 5 wounds, and then play this card, possibly get all the wounds back. I mean, it's not easy to take those fighters out of action. This card was in every single one of their decks. Happy it has been banned. Since those fighters are so difficult to take out of action, it really works against the primacy counter, gives them a huge advantage in that kind of a gameplay. Anyway, happy it's gone. That's the only Forsaken card that was added to this list. And as far as restricted cards go, there are many, many restricted cards. Let's just start with the first one. It's an objective card. It's Cover Ground. Surge scores immediately after a friendly fighter makes a move action in which they enter 6 or more hexes. Actually, a Season 1 card that was released in the gift pack. And this is a really good card. Very passive. As long as you have a fighter who can move 6 hexes, it's a guaranteed score as long as that fighter is alive to move the 6 hexes when this card gets drawn. Obviously, you could buff a fighter to get them up to 6 hexes. Just a strong card. No real answer to. Certainly deserves to be restricted. Happy it's added. If it wasn't added, it's definitely not a game-breaking card because it's not as if every warband can take advantage of this, but still happy it is on this list. Next is Show of Force, which is a hybrid surge card. Score this immediately after an activation if 3 or more friendly fighters are in enemy territory, or 1 or more friendly fighters each have 3 or more upgrades. Similarly, no problem at all having this added to the restricted list. Easy add to most decks. Pretty high likelihood that any warband is going to have at least 1 fighter that they're going to try to put 3 or more upgrades on. And if not that, have some fighters that are willing to advance in enemy territory. So making it restricted is nice. Will prevent it from showing up so much across the board. And final objective card to be added to this restricted list is Surge of Aggression, also a Surge, and a hybrid. Scores immediately after you gain the Primacy token or a friendly fighter's successful attack action with a damage characteristic of 4+. Nice that this is restricted, mostly because the warbands that are really good at scoring this are also really good at getting the Primacy token, which comes with its own obvious advantages. I think this has mostly been restricted to debuff Morgox, because Ardskull can just score this from taking a basic swing, really. So yeah, just happy it's restricted, giving it a little check mark here. Not a game changer, but definitely a nice addition to the list. Next, we're moving on to power cards. We have Amber Bone Sword, 1 range, 3 hammer, 2 damage. Can be used consistently unless an enemy is taken out of action with it, at which point that fighter, or rather that warband, will gain 1 glory point. Also, think it should be added to the list. They added Amber Bone Mace, which is basically 2 hammers and allows a reroll. And I always thought Amber Bone Sword was just a superior version of the Amber Bone weapons. So if you're going to add the mace, they might as well add the sword because they essentially serve the same function. Next is Crown of the Dead. One of the Mortis relics. If this fighter has 2 or more Mortis relics, you can reroll 1 attack dice in this fighter's attack rolls. So very nice if you're accumulating these relics. More interestingly, though, as a reaction after this fighter's activation, spend 1 glory point. If you do, draw 2 power cards and then discard 1 power card. So allows you to really shuffle through your power deck. Very, very powerful card. Nice to have it on this list. It's obviously not a card that applies to everybody's decks, but those who abuse the Mortis Relic upgrade system now have to pay a bit more for it, which I like. And there's Deserved Confidence, which is a pretty interesting card. This fighter has the following cumulative benefits, depending on how many upgrades they have. Basically, equip it if they have 3 or more upgrades, including this card. They get +1 wounds, and the fighter cannot be driven back. So this alone is a very powerful effect. You have 2 other upgrades. Equip this, you get +1 wound, can't be driven back. The no drive back is amazing, especially when there are lots of lethal hexes around. If you happen to have 5 or more, you get +1 move, which is, minor benefit, nothing too amazing. And 9+, all of their attack actions have innate fury and smash, which isn't super likely to happen, but is intense if it does happen. I'm okay with this being restricted. I don't know if it was super necessary for it to be restricted. It's mostly a nerf on Molog, I think, on Hrothgorn, Kanan also. So on Kanan, this is beneficial as well because those guys are pretty OP. But I could have done without this being added, but I have no problem with it being added either. Another Mortis Relic, Gauntlet of Command. This one gives +1 wounds. And if you spend a glory point as a reaction after the fighter's activation, you could push 1 friendly fighter 1 hex. Now, this absolutely needed to be restricted. Just a distraction whenever it's convenient to have a distraction. Distraction in general is just a really powerful effect. Destroys positional play, puts enemies in lethal hexes, puts them in range of attacks. The control aspect that this card provides is massive. Needed to be on this list. Very happy it is. Also has the added advantage of making the Mortis Relic strategy be more expensive, which is completely fine in my books. We have Geomancer's Gauntlet. As an action, flip each feature token within 1 hex. I guess I approve of this being added to the list. I don't know if it was super necessary. Can't really say I've seen this mechanic get abused a ton. It has to be equipped. An action has to be spent, and it can only flip adjacent tokens, which unless you've had other power cards to manipulate objective tokens, will typically only be 1 objective token. So it is fairly expensive to use, does require you to get next to those tokens, which, probably if you want to be effective would be the ones in enemy territory. So like I said, I'm okay with this being added. I don't know if it was really necessary to add it. I don't see this card getting played very much unless there's a deck that really wants to center around just flipping all those objective tokens. Next is Haughty Resistance. As a reaction during an attack action that targets this fighter, after the deal damage step, gain the Primacy token. If you have the Primacy token, instead discard the Primacy token and reduce the damage dealt by 1. So this becomes another innovative way of obtaining the Primacy token without outright killing an enemy or holding 4 objective tokens. I guess I approve of this being added, mostly for those warbands that are good at getting the Primacy token anyway. So like Morgox, for example. You have this card, they take a smack, they don't die, you get a Primacy token for it. Similar with Headcrackers, who can then inspire a fighter. So I guess it's good to have it restricted just so it doesn't become so easy to manipulate that whole Primacy mechanic. It is a bit of a hit on those weaker, more horde warbands who don't have too many avenues to obtain the Primacy token. This became an easy avenue to get it. And now that it's restricted, it ends up costing them more. So, like I said, I guess I approve of it being added to this list. but I find its impact is larger on those warbands who are weak at obtaining the primacy token. There's Hunter's Talisman, which is restricted to hunters. You get +1 dice to this fighter's attack action. And if the target is a quarry, you can reroll 1 attack dice in the attack roll. So once again, also approve of this card being added. Gave a huge bonus to Hunter. So if you have a Hunter like Hrothgorn, he gets +1 dice, which means inspired, he's landing shots on 4 hammers. Everybody's a quarry, so you can reroll 1 attack dice in the attack roll. Super powerful. Obviously, it's not super beneficial for warbands that don't have the Hunter keyword unless they're putting in cards to make their characters Hunters. I feel like this restriction is mostly targeting Hrothgorn, who gains massive benefits from it with little effort. Even applies to his ranged attack, so yeah, deserves to be here for sure. Let's just move on to Mischievous Spirits. Now, I was around when Season 1 came out, and this card just didn't get played that often. I'd see it get played every once in a while. I put it in a few of my decks sometimes. It was definitely an inconvenience. The focus was more on aggro in Season 1. They were just better cards, I guess, for the meta than this card. So like I said, I didn't see this card get used a ton. But lately, this card gets played all the time. It completely screws over anybody trying to score objectives in an end phase from holding objective tokens. So basically, when you play this card, starting with you and going clockwise, each player does the following. They pick an objective that has not been moved by this ploy, and they move that objective to an adjacent hex. So all the objectives basically get moved in this way. Definitely, this card needs to be restricted. It's too easy to just plop this in a deck, kill end phase objective play, which isn't powerful at all right now, really. Aggro is dominating the meta, especially with the whole primacy token mechanic. So it's nice to have this restricted. Might create a bit of a resurgence for warbands, especially horde warbands that are good at holding objective tokens in end phases. And next one here is Proud Runner, which is a +1 move as an upgrade. And each time this fighter finishes a move action 5 or more hexes from where the move action began, they gain the primacy token. And at the end of the action phase, if this fighter has no move or charge token, you discard the primacy token. So they can get the primacy token fairly easily, but must continue to move to get it or stay alive. Reasonable addition. Makes it a bit challenging to get the primacy token. Mostly affects warbands that are fast and also not great at killing, like Skate's Wild Hunt, for example. So it hurts warbands like that. I don't know if it was super necessary to add this, but they added it, and I guess I'm okay with it. Savage Visage. This fighter becomes a hunter, and you could reroll 1 dice in this fighter's attack rolls for range 1 attack actions for each of the fighter's upgrades that have 1 or more instances of the hunter keyword. So a nice card to make fighters into hunters. Instantly gives them a reroll on their attack actions, possibly several, depending on how many hunter keyword cards you dedicate to them. I'm okay with this being restricted. Once again, not sure how necessary it is. It was kind of a nice card for some of the older warbands who had no hunters to just make them a hunter and make them effective in hunter quarry play. Now it's restricted. It is what it is. There's Slick Rock, a very useful ploy played in pretty much everybody's deck. As a reaction, play this after an enemy fighter's move action that ends in the same hex as an objective token. Scatter 1 from that hex and push that enemy fighter to the end of the chain. If that enemy fighter cannot be pushed into a hex, that fighter is not pushed. So huge screw job card. Certainly deserved to be added here. Hurts objective play a lot. Often hurts aggro play, as a typical aggressive strategy would be to charge onto an objective token to make an attack, either to score based on holding that objective token or to prevent the enemy from holding that objective token. But now that becomes a dangerous strategy because you might slip off of that objective token out of range of your attack, get a charge token, and not be able to make the attack action, making this card incredibly useful, incredibly valuable, played all the time, and definitely deserving to be on this list. There's Sting of the Urgrub, with its great strength effect of +1 damage, and also being an Urgrub aspect, which has its own benefits. It's restricted. I'm okay with it. Makes it a bit difficult to become Avatar of the Urgrub, which hurts Molog. Poor Molog. And the last universal card to be added to the restricted list is Substance Siphon, which is an upgrade. This fighter's defense characteristic is Dodge X, where X is the round number. Their defense characteristic cannot be modified, and you cannot reroll dice in the defense roll when this fighter is the target of an attack action. So really nice for those fighters who just have crappy dodge characteristic or defense characteristic, I guess. Morgoks and Mologs were the real beneficiaries of this card, who in round 3 could have 3 dodge defense. So I approve this card being added. I think it's reasonable. I don't think it's generally abusive, but for those specific warbands, I can see how it can be quite abusive. And that does it for the universal cards. And there are a few faction-specific cards that have been restricted as well. There's Lady Harrow's Mournflight getting a much-needed second restricted card, which is Fleeting Memories. which is a surge in which you score immediately when a friendly fighter finishes a move action and enter 2 or more different hexes that contain an objective token during that move action. It's just a freebie. It's passive, requires no effort. It's an automatic score for a warband that's already very powerful. Very happy this is added. I had always thought it was odd that Thorns of the Briar Queen and Grimwatch had 3 restricted cards, and Lady Harrows only had 1. Even though, in my opinion, I think that they're superior to those warbands. But happy that this card got added. It was definitely necessary. Next is Rippa's Snarlfangs, who surprisingly, in my opinion, got a restricted card. For 2 glory, it's a score in the end phase card if 2 or more enemy fighters are out of action and 1 or more friendly fighter are in enemy territory. So not really sure this needed to be restricted, to be honest, because it really depends on the warband you're facing. If you're facing an elite 3-unit warband, this becomes incredibly hard to score. And even if these guys are fighting a horde warband with many units, there's no guarantee that they're going to have 2 enemy fighters taken out of action in the first round. So if it's drawn in the first round, it can become hard to score. I just don't think it was necessary. I don't think that Rippa's is destroying or dominating the meta. Feels like a bit of an unnecessary restricted add-on, but they did it, so it is what it is. There's Hrothgorn's Man-Trappers getting Arm of the Everwinter restricted, which is a surge that you score immediately when your warband removes a feature token from the battlefield or flips a feature token worth 1 glory. I'm also giving this a WTF. I understand the desire to nerf Hrothgorns for the sake of nerfing Hrothgorns, but this card isn't an OP card. Hrothgorns has 2 cards in their deck that allows them to score this, which requires putting them in your power deck, which takes up space in and of itself, and really isn't that easy to achieve since those cards require to be adjacent to or on one of those cards. I think one of them requires Bushwhacker to be alive, and he might be dead by the time you even draw the power card that allows him to destroy an objective token. So for me, this was not much easier to score than Shortcut, for example, and I don't think Shortcut really deserved to be on the restricted list. But anyway, this is on the restricted list. We'll just move on to Morgoth's Crushes, who have 2 new additions, which I think is good because they certainly need to be nerfed. There is Godit Boss, which is a surge, which you score immediately after an activation if your warband holds 1 or more objectives in enemy territory, which is just a freebie because these guys are advancing for sure. They have a push mechanic to help them grab an objective token more easily if they really want to. Nice addition to the list for sure. And there's Berserk Fortitude, which is a ploy, which has a reaction during this fighter's attack action that targets a friendly fighter before the deal damage step. Remove any number of Wa counters from that fighter's fighter card. The attack action has -1 damage for each counter removed. I guess I approve of this. I don't think that this is the most impactful card, but I can see how it can be fairly easy for these guys to accumulate Wa counters and then to just have this card in hand and then use it as a buffer to stop damage when they're already super tough. So I'm okay with the addition, mostly because Morgoth's Crushes need a nerf for sure, certainly in today's meta. And finally, poor Molog once again gets Foul Temper restricted, which allows him to reroll a dice in attack rolls for this fighter's attack action. I mean, I get it. I approve of it. It is a very nice card. It's obviously getting included into any Molog's deck because you just put it on Molog, who's your main fighter, who can then re-roll a dice every time he makes an attack, and he makes several. So restricted is good, but I definitely do feel bad for Molog, who's taken a large hit in general and certainly in this meta. And that pretty much does it for my overview of all these changes. So just final thoughts here, a little review, recapping the errata where Molog's special ability when inspired got nerfed, and fortunately Ravagers got a buff, making it easier for them to inspire. Championship rules got a nice clarification. Isn't a surprise because we probably could have figured out what the championship rules were, but is certainly nice to have it made official. And restricted play got an update with all the new forbidden and restricted cards, most of which are great, most of which are beneficial, some of which are a little bit of head scratchers. But overall, big improvement to the game. I'm happy that Games Workshop has released this to show us that they're still trying to put efforts into balancing the game and making things fun, interesting, and competitive. Hopefully, as they move forward, they do these more often and more proactively and release content more slowly, so that doesn't become just a grind to purchase and then a last-minute correction. But at least they did it, so I can't hate on them too much for that. So thanks for watching this video. If you guys have any thoughts or suggestions, please comment below. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and I hope that you all have a nice day.